Jay Robbins with Robbins Real Estate, and today I want to talk to you about some common ways that buyers and sellers get out of their contracts. Okay, so there are some ways that people get out of their contracts. Not all of them are legitimate. Some of them are, and the legitimate ways to get out of the contract is what I'm going to go over with you today. So I'm going to go over a contract with you, show you what's in the contract. Most of these are protections for a buyer. Here we've got a regular Texas Real Estate Commission contract with Sally Seller, Barry Buyer, Betty Buyer on 123 Main Street. I know, not very creative, but this is a promulgated Texas real estate contract. So the most common way that a buyer is going to get out of a contract is down in paragraph 23. It's called the option period. Most contracts have a termination option, and this says that for some fee, in this example $250, and for some number of days, in this example 10 days, it's usually a nominal fee, $100 to $250, 5 to 10 days. This says that the buyer can back out of the contract for any reason. Why is this in the contract really? It's really so the buyer can do their inspections. If there's some sort of problem, then the buyer can back out if they can't come to terms with the seller. But it is a time-limited way for a buyer to back out. The next most common way that a buyer will terminate a contract is right here in this financing contingency. Most contracts are on a mortgage or purchased with a mortgage. Most buyers say they need a financing contingency. They need 14 days to get approval. I think 14 is kind of the upper limit. Some realtors will put 21 in there, which I think is too much. The next thing is we have this property approval. So most lenders are going to appraise the property, and it has to meet their guidelines for not only repairs and insurability, but value. So they're going to send an appraiser out. The appraiser is going to determine the value, look at see if there's plumbing leaks, bad foundation problems, and if the property fails, then the buyer can back out and get their earnest money back. The next common way, and we're getting a little more obscure here, if a buyer does not receive the seller's disclosure notice. If you're a seller, you really need to deliver the seller's disclosure notice, because the contract says if they don't get the seller's disclosure notice at the time of the contract, then they have 7 days after they get the seller's disclosure notice to back out. So even if you send the seller's disclosure notice a few days, 5 days, 7 days after the contract is signed, they'll have another week to back out. Okay, now this is obscure and most realtors don't pay attention to it, but I promise you we do. HOA subdivision information. If you're a seller, it's really important for you to deliver that subdivision information, HOA documents, resale certificate, and everything to the buyer. Because the contract says that 3 days after they get it, they can terminate the contract for any reason. I have seen this too many times where we get all the way almost to closing, and the resale certificate comes in or the HOA documents come in, and the buyer backs out a week before closing, 3 days before closing, and it's perfectly legitimate because they had the right to back out of the contract. Again, a lot of listing brokers don't pay attention to this. We take these deadlines seriously. If you're watching this and you're doing this on your own or you have another realtor, please make sure you get your subdivision information delivered on time and quickly. Now, finally, we've got lead-based paint hazards. So sometimes if a house is built before 1978, a buyer will say that they want the right to look for lead-based paint hazards. They have 10 days to do that, and if they find lead-based paint, then they've got 14 days from the date of the contract to terminate. I've only seen this happen a few times. I prefer this box number 1 to be checked, because a buyer can look for lead-based paint during their option period if they want, right? When they're doing the rest of their inspections, I don't think they need extra time. There are a couple of ways that are the most common ways for a seller to terminate a contract. Number 1 is if the buyer fails to deliver earnest money. You see here the contract says that earnest money needs to be delivered within 3 days. If earnest money is not delivered to the title company within 3 days, the seller can terminate on the buyer. So if you're buying a house, make sure that you or your realtor coordinates that earnest money going to the title company within 3 days. It's really important. Or the seller could back out and sell to somebody else for a higher offer. And then the other way that a seller can terminate the contract, again, not that common. If a buyer were to miss the closing date, then the seller can send notice that the buyer didn't perform, they didn't show up with their money, and they're not going to close. So these are the most common, legitimate ways that contracts terminate. They're all built into the contract. Of course, we can guide you through any of this if you call us to represent you in your transaction. I hope you found this video informative and a little bit interesting. Drop a comment below, like the video, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, have a great day.